This is Helena at Large. I'm Helena Strauss, and in this video, I want to tell you my story about how I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma and how much starting treatment, what we call induction therapy in the myeloma world, changed my life. You might not imagine you are ever going to feel any better when you are diagnosed, but it is quite common to feel better and to get things back that you have lost. First, let me tell you the story of my diagnosis. Like many myeloma patients, I had a period of fatigue. I was persistently tired, but it was somewhat vague, and I chalked it up to menopause and getting older. I was in my early 50s at the time, and certainly never imagined that there was a blood cancer behind my fatigue. After a while, though, pain in my ribs sent me to my primary care doctor. My regular blood labs, CBC and comprehensive metabolic panel, were normal at the time, and my doctor prescribed physical therapy. But 10 days later, before I could get to PT, I had extreme pain in my back, and I became bedridden. After 6 weeks in bed, I had an even more painful episode in which something went crunch in my chest and I couldn't breathe. I had fractured my sternum, but the fracture did not show on the standard x-rays performed at the emergency room, and the reading radiologist missed a few compression fractures that did show. So after ruling out a heart attack, the emergency room sent me home with lidocaine patches. I followed up with my primary care doctor, and she wrote scripts for me to have MRIs done of my chest, abdomen, and pelvis when I was well enough to get them. But I remained bedridden and unable to ambulate. A month later, now 2.5 months into being bedridden, I reported to my doctor that I was even having trouble getting to the commode next to my bed without excruciating pain, and was still not well enough to get to or go through an MRI exam. But my doctor refused to admit me to the hospital for testing when I begged. She was incredibly fixed on the idea that I had to have my MRIs done as an outpatient, and, frankly, gaslighted me and treated me like my pain was somatic. Out of desperation, I contacted an old doctor who specialized in difficult-to-treat pain and had helped me 20 years earlier when I herniated discs in my lumbar spine. For months, we had telehealth appointments and experimented with combinations of muscle relaxants, tramadol, Xanax, and NSAIDs, trying to find the right combo that would allow me to get to and make it through an MRI. After about 10 weeks, we found a combination that gave me enough relief for a few hours, and I was able to schedule an outpatient MRI, which, unfortunately, due to lab capacity and the need for insurance authorization, took another month to be performed. When the MRIs were finally done, they showed 11 vertebral compression fractures in various stages of brokenness and healing, a sternum that had fractured multiple times, and so many breaks in my ribs that I didn't even count them. When my primary care doctor saw the results, she finally started taking my pain seriously. She ordered more detailed blood work, ordering a technician to come to my house to draw blood instead of continuing to insist that I get to outpatient labs. After my blood results came back, she knew I had cancer. Most likely a parathyroid tumor, she said, or possibly multiple myeloma. But finally, after being bedridden for 6 months, she told me to go to the emergency room and arranged for me to be admitted for testing. Within 48 hours of being admitted, multiple myeloma was diagnosed, and I was finally given the powerful pain meds, time-release morphine and oxycodone that I needed. However, when they didn't outright put me to sleep, I was still in enormous pain. I had all the CRAB criteria: high calcium, renal failure, anemia, and of course bone involvement. And although staging in multiple myeloma is not the same as other cancers, I was what is considered stage 3. And in myeloma, there is no stage 4. I stayed in the hospital for 8 days, and when I returned home, I was still bedridden and still in a lot of pain, but relieved and at peace to know that I was not crazy or malingering. It was good to know the true cause of my pain, disability, and suffering, and that it had a name. It took me some weeks to put together my medical team after diagnosis. I needed to do research and check with insurance. The doctors at the hospital tried to rush me into treatment, but I knew I needed a multiple myeloma specialist, and I've done a separate video on why you need one too. My personal team became headed by a specialist at the Multiple Myeloma program at Mount Sinai, who designed my treatment protocol mostly via telehealth visits. I then received treatment locally at New York Cancer and Blood Specialists, an outfit that prides itself in delivering community care that people can access close to home. Still bedridden and on morphine and oxycodone, I started treatment in a wheelchair. This was my protocol: Cytoxin, Velcade for 3 weeks out of 4, along with a steroid, and Darzalex once a week for the first 9 weeks. It was discovered along the way that dexamethasone, the standard steroid myeloma treatment, gives me tachycardia, so my steroid was methylprednisone. The day I started treatment was a Monday, and I was scheduled to get my first treatment over 2 8-hour days back to back. If you get Darzalex by IV when you begin, it's given very slowly to make sure you don't have a reaction. For me, I got through the first day okay, but I woke up the next morning with a myalgia flare. Pain everywhere, nausea, and a dizzying migraine. Treatment hit me so hard that when I showed up for the second day, I was given more morphine, and I think Zofran, and was put in a dark room to rest. Needless to say, that second day, treatment was postponed. However, I was able to have it 3 days later on Friday. A week after that, I received my second treatment. And within a day, my white cell counts plummeted and I spiked a fever which landed me in the hospital for a week. I was cultured for all kinds of infections, but in the end, I was just neutropenic, and my fever resolved as my white counts slowly climbed back up. When I received my third treatment after weeks delayed due to my fever and the stay in the hospital, it went okay. I was exhausted and I had to sleep afterwards, and also started having some vomiting and diarrhea, mostly from the Cytoxin, but I never landed in the hospital again. And my doctors tweaked my anti-nausea and diarrhea meds to help me manage that day or two that those symptoms occurred during the week between treatments. By 6 weeks after my initial start of treatment, my kappa light chains, which were over 2,000 when I started therapy, were completely normal. But more than that, my pain was starting to subside. I started physical therapy at home, and very slowly, I started to use a walker instead of a wheelchair. It was at this point when I stood up again that I learned I'd lost 6 inches in height and now had kyphosis. But I was up on my feet and in less pain. In order to avoid any relapse in pain, I used a pedometer that I wore on my ankle to count my steps, literally starting at 100 steps a day and adding 100 more each day only if I was up to it. As important as it was to get up on my feet again, it was equally important that I made sure to do it slowly, even if I felt I could do more, because my bones were still damaged and I did not want to have any setbacks by pushing. It was also at this time that I was able to have kyphoplasty, an injection of cement, to 2 of my 11 fractured vertebrae. And while it did not restore my height because my fractures had occurred more than 3 months earlier, the kyphoplasty helped me breathe better. Into the 3rd month of treatment, my progress remained steady, and I knew it when I saw all the nurses and staff at my infusion center. I was aware that I was 6 inches shorter, but all they saw was the miracle of treatment. This woman who came in a wheelchair and struggled to get into the bathroom was now using a walker and doing okay with it. They were thrilled for me. And just 1 month later, I was starting to use a cane and off all the morphine and oxycodone. I cannot say the period of induction therapy was easy. I was very ill when I started, and my body was full of myeloma and the treatment drugs too, and their side effects. But as soon as the treatment drugs started doing their thing and my myeloma decreased, the lesions on my bones slowly started to disappear, and my pain lessened, and my body began remembering how to move. Now when I go in for my monthly maintenance treatment, an injection of Darafast Pro, I drive myself and often leave my cane in the car, a thing that was unimaginable when I started. And if the nurses are having a particularly bad day because someone with some other cancer has died, my doctor sends me back to cheer them up because they remember how I started. Think of it this way for a moment. I am not special. I am just another myeloma patient like you. And I got a lot better during induction therapy. So have hope. And educate yourself and get a specialist and learn the myeloma lingo. But mostly, have hope. I'm Helena Strauss.